Welcome to the Tamarind Learning Podcast, where host Dr. Kirby Rosplock speaks with experts on topics relevant to the ultra-high net worth family wealth management space. Please note, the views and information shared are for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial, legal, or investment advice. Kirby is author of several books including The Complete Family Office Handbook and shares her expertise consulting with families and family offices. Kirby is also the founder of Tamarind Learning, an online wealth education platform that develops practical foundational learning programs for beneficiaries to help them prepare for responsible stewardship of wealth.
Welcome to the Tamarind Learning Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kirby Rosplock, and we're talking about a subject near and dear to my heart and most people's stomach. So we're talking food today with Brian Burke, and he has an extraordinary story that's super fun and fascinating, but it's also something really personal. So Brian, why don't you tell us more about Food First Travel, how you came up with this idea, and why food is an important part of our rituals and our culture?
I would love to. So thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to this. So Food First Travel really came out of something that my wife and I were looking for when we decided that we wanted to begin traveling in our late 20s. The first trip we were actually looking to take was our honeymoon. And we really were looking to travel through this food and wine lens. And we quickly realized that going through the typical travel agency route, that they had expertise in travel, but the depth that we wanted to go on the culinary side was something that we couldn't find. So like most entrepreneurs, we saw a gap and we ended up filling it. So today we design culinary journeys for travelers who care about exceptional dining, access, a stronger connection to place. And to the latter part of your question, I think that that's something super important in a day of today where, everything can be generated by an app and you can get recommendations on where to go and who to see and things like that. But we very much are old school in what we're doing and believe that relationships are still the foundation to society. And we are going all in on in-person and experiential traveling. But yeah, why food? It's always honestly been the most honest part of travel for us. And it's always been something that our families we didn't travel growing up often, especially to Europe, but it was always the center of every day. I grew up spoiled in an Italian-American household that my mom cooked dinner every night. My grandmother did the same thing. My wife, Angela, also grew up in a household where, food was cooked every night. So it's just something we kind of always grew up around, and our most sacred, traditions and, things that we hold near and dear to our hearts and, our family, for people who are still with us or not with us anymore, all goes back to food. So for us, it was a very easy transition into doing this as a career, but that's not where my career started. So definitely something that grew out of a passion and being in prior businesses beforehand, and just something that we didn't fall or stumble upon. But if you were to ask me 10 years ago if we would have had a culinary travel company, my answer probably would have been no, but it would have been really cool to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of, I know you have quite an eclectic background. So do you want to talk more about how you went from sports and tech and education and investing, and just also how those sort of probably formative pieces of your career also had notes of food was pretty important, in all those other ventures. But tell us more about your background because it's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight is 20/20, right? So I'm able to now look back and see the through line in anything that I've ever done, even from being 13 years old and caddying at a country club. My parents didn't play golf. I didn't play golf. I still don't play golf. I always looked at caddying on a golf course is I was going to get paid if I was going to walk the golf course. But it was honestly the most informative and impactful job that I've ever had, because it got to show me, really what entrepreneurship was like. Although I grew up and my father was an entrepreneur as well, but this was kind of my first taste of it for myself at a young age. And I loved the fact that depending on the experience that I was able to deliver for the golfer, was the more money I made. And I found that super fascinating. So it started there. And then, yeah, like you had mentioned, I had started my first company out of school, in higher education and fundraising. And again, very much experiential and hospitality. Maybe not the first thing that you think about when you think about, university fundraising, but it very much started there because it was special events and taking donors and alumni out to events and having those conversations of why someone should donate to a university. A lot of that happened over a table.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you keep expanding that beyond into some of the investments that we've made and, into sports and entertainment. And again, always around restaurants, food, hospitality. But I actually didn't even realize any of that until we decided to start, our new company that we started about 2 years ago. So I think hospitality and service, I will tell you that as much as I love, investing in other companies and helping founders grow, I very much am service oriented. If you put a product in front of me, I have a harder time even knowing where I can bring my value. Maybe it's a check as an investor, but as far as an advisor of how to grow that business, I've always been service oriented, and I always connect that back to my very first job that I ever had. So, if you were to ask the people who are closest to me, what they know me best for, it would be food and wine. I mean, we're the people who host every holiday and love to cook, and I'm obsessive about wine and things like that. So very natural transition into having a business beforehand and now doing something that I actually really love to do. To people maybe a little bit, 1 degree outside of my network, going from, ed tech to alumni relations to sports and entertainment might not be the linear path that is as clear, but to people around us, it was everything I've really learned throughout my career and just applying it in the space in which, we want this to be our legacy company. This is something that's really important to us, and we want this to be at the, when it's all over, that this is the company we're known for.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you see the through line. I see the through line. And yes, I love food. I admit it. But
Who doesn't?
who
Yeah.
doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
you're like on a GLP-1, I know people who are on GLP-1 still love food too. And I love that you think about what you're building now as your legacy venture. Tell us more. Like, why did that really resonate with you and your wife?
I think going back to, again, how we grew up, and it was such a central part of every, of our lives, every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday, just gathering around a table. I still to this day believe it's the most important thing that a family can do is gather around a table, whether it's, 1 day a week or every night during the week, if you're blessed enough to be able to have that opportunity. I just think it's so important from that perspective. It's just, that's the reason why we want to do what we do. And we're never going to be those parents. We have 2 little girls, a 5.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. We're never going to be those parents who force a G2 business onto our kids. But it is something that I've always thought about, that if I continued on my trajectory prior to this company, it would have never been something that my kids would have been able to take over. And not just my kids, it wouldn't have been something that anyone would have been able to step in and do, because if you really boiled it down, I was a, well-paid consultant for a long time. This is a lot cooler where, when we do travel, if I'm away from home, my girls know where I am. They're, interested in what we're doing. My 5-year-old has a little desk in my home office that, has future CEO written on it. And she loves talking to the chefs and hearing about what we're doing. And, if we're at a special event like we do often in New York, and, we're saying goodnight, we walk away from the table to say goodnight, her first question is like, how is the raviolo tonight? Right? Like, she loves what we do. And I think it's really special to be able to explain and share what you do for a living with your children. And if one day they want to take it over, great. If not, I'm sure we'll have another plan by then. But that is why when I say our legacy company, I think it's so valuable. And I think just society as a whole, it's something that is really fading. And it almost seems like a 1940s, 1950s type of concept of gathering around a table. I want to make sure that it's here 100 years from now.
And you know what? If you, as parents, don't emphasize the importance of rituals like sitting down together,
Yeah.
um, your kids don't think it matters either. So
Yes.
I think it's a lot of times the values that we are instilling and for generations, right?
Yeah.
The table was the time to convene to, I know for my family, like a lot of family business discussion was always had growing up and hearing what was going on. Um, a lot of families that I work with, it's like the one kind of safe zone. Yeah, they
Yeah.
might bicker and like disagree, but it's not the board table. It's the kitchen or
Right.
dining room table. And that's
Right.
like a huge point I want to make, that I think the kitchen or the dining room table is a place of like nourishment. Like we're eating together, we're feeling good, we're filling our bellies, we're drinking a good glass of wine or having a beverage. Tell us more about just the places that you go and like how you get inspired by this food ritual that you're creating.
Yeah, so we focus a lot of our work in Europe. We go where, the best culinary experiences are. Very often than not, it flows where the wine flows. So in France, we're going to places like Champagne, Burgundy, Northern Rhone, Bordeaux. In Italy, it's Emilia-Romagna, Tuscany, Piedmont. Spain, it's Basque Country, Catalonia, Rioja. So everywhere that is very, very unique, and regions that are very unique to that culture that are there. So that's, where we tend to go. We do a lot of work in the United States as well, because I think as Americans, we think that we have to leave the United States to have like an amazing experience. The truth is, some of the best food that's even native to, let's say, Italian food. You can have some of the best Italian food in the world in Los Angeles and New York, right? You don't have to get on a plane and go there. But when you do go there, the reason it's so important is, and this is very different, I feel like, when you do travel. One, I think travel opens up your eyes to, a literal different place of the world.
Yeah.
But by doing that, especially in Europe, you slow down, and it's not just because you're taking a vacation, because you can take a vacation here and not slow down, but you can't help but to slow down if you move to, go somewhere for Europe for a longer period of time. And the stories of those chefs and those restaurants and the history, for someone who's never been to Europe, it's mind-boggling that a restaurant there can be older than how old the United States is. Like it's
Mm.
and by 10x. Like it's very, sometimes it's the space in which a restaurant is held is, a couple thousand years old. So to me, it's a good, it grounds you. And I think it's really important that, especially as things become more digitized and AI like, I think those things that really matter, the tradition, heritage, immersive experiences. You're already seeing an increase in all of those everywhere, but I
Mm.
think it's super important. And, as Americans, a lot of us can draw our heritage back to Europe as well. So from that perspective, it's really cool to see, my family could have been doing this, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of the best experiences are traditions that build from there. Um, so for us, it's the story behind the food that matters the most.
You talk about food as cultural intelligence. I love this idea. And tell us more, because I can imagine when you're popping into a restaurant that's been there for a couple hundred years, um, right? That family culture is pouring through generation to generation, but the same recipe might be passed on for decades, and how that also informs the experience that your clients are having.
Yeah, I think food is the number one lens into how a family, town, city, region, country lives, right? I think food teaches family what a place actually values and wants
Mm.
to preserve. So, to your point, a recipe might be passed down from generation to generation, and maybe every time it's passed down, something minor is tweaked. But when you look back on, history of where that recipe came from, I think it's really important. And I think there's a really good balance of balancing tradition and then putting your own spin on it. We do that all the time with the holidays in which we host. But you can learn a lot from architecture, museums, but food puts you inside your daily life. Like I just hung up a call with a client this morning and we were just talking about, and even you said it on this call, everybody needs to eat. Like it's a basic function of human life. So why would we not do it well? Um,
Yeah.
so to me, it always just is a place to gather around and to celebrate the best moments in life. But it doesn't need to be a holiday to have a really great experience if there's a lot of thought into the table that you're, curating for, even just having, family or friends over. But I think it's the best lens into how a place lives and what they care most about. You'll find that on the table or during your conversation across the table.
Yeah. And I think like intentionality, because right now we're a grab and go, at least in American culture, grab and go
Yeah.
kind of culture, instant gratification. Does it taste good? Is it in a pretty package? Um, and there's something to be said about creating the space and
Yeah.
having a pause, put down like the phone, put down the technology, see each other, be in each other's presence, share that like deliciousness or that experience. And I don't know, I think we're rushing through so much of our food rituals, not actually recognizing what quality food is, what the history is. And I do think that what you're shaping are durable learning experiences that as families, they'll always remember what it tasted like that night in Tuscany at that small little, you know,
Hmm.
that only had 5 tables, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We
Uh,
actually hear that one of the things I hear often, just, I mean, even prior to this business, is when someone tells me that was the best cup of coffee I've ever had, like I ever had, or, fill in whatever they're eating or drinking. And I probably am one of the only people who then take it a step further and say why, because I'm trying to peel back why that experience is. Because the reality of you drinking that best cup of coffee is pretty unlikely. Probably was very good coffee if it stood out. But the best and the real reason behind that is the atmosphere around it, where you were, the people you were sharing it with, the memory and experience that you're able to pull on, right? We're all going to look back when we're 80, 90, 100 years old, and we're always going to look back on the memories of the experiences we had, not the product that we bought in 2026. It's just not going to matter. And I think realizing that at an early age is such an advantage. And that's what we're able to deliver, every day. And it's fun being in those experiences.
Yeah. I love knowing the rituals that you're creating. And I know one thing you shared with me earlier was how important the word tradition is. And maybe to some, it's like, oh, that's dated, that's old news. But we see all these things that were old coming back, and why a tradition like sitting around the table, eating really good food, being intentional, what is that value that families are sharing? And that doesn't have to be, it can be culture to culture, but it's
Yeah.
that space. And I'd love to hear more from you about that.
Yeah, I mean, like you had mentioned, it is my absolute favorite word in the English language, probably in any language. But to me, tradition does not necessarily have that connotation of it's not just nostalgia. I think the most important part about tradition is continuity. And to me, that's something that's very important. Tradition is how families can take those values that very much can be taught around a table without needing to announce them or celebrate them. It's how something, a memory, a piece of your culture, a piece of your family, it's how you get that carried forward. And when we work on our side of the world, what we work with our clients, I mean, wealth can open a lot of those doors, but tradition is often what holds those people together
Mm,
once they, sit down at that table and walk through them. Where, especially, from a wealth perspective, there's a lot of someone had to change that family tree, someone had to make that money at some point. And I think your traditions are able to pull you back into a time where maybe your family tree wasn't as blessed and as fortunate as what you've been able to experience today. So to me, tradition isn't just getting together on Christmas. It's why you're getting together on Christmas. It's why you're doing. In our family, it's why am I cooking the Feast of the Seven Fishes on Christmas Eve, right? As, you know, an Italian American family. It's because 90 plus years ago, my great grandmother started it.
Mm.
And it's only been passed down from four different people. I'm the fourth person from there that it's been. So to me, I'm cooking what my great grandmother did 100 years ago versus, and to me, there's just so much value there. And do my little kids know that right now? No, they know that we get together on Christmas Eve, but I'm teaching them the traditions and values that we hold close to us. And when they come of age, they'll realize what it is. And they'll probably be just like me. There'll be a kid that realizes as an adult, wow, that was so special back then when it was just the way we grew up. And I didn't take enough time to appreciate it then. But I also think that's part of the beauty of tradition. It's you get to a point in life, you could be in your early 20s, you can be in your 60s when you actually finally appreciate it. But yes, definitely my favorite word. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I love the idea of how tradition doesn't have to feel like outmodish, old,
Right.
stale, and how you also talk about, bringing your lens to it, adding to it, building on it. And I think about the fact that the table and food and community is really where we build the most trust. So we get to know each
Yeah.
other. And I mean, I'm sure in your prior lives of doing business, like it wasn't when you were inking the deal at the boardroom table, it was all those trust building, conversation building, knowing who's across the table from you, like
Yep.
literally breaking bread, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's,
I think it's even that phrase that you just said, breaking bread, that people just like throw around so like casually, that has a very, very old origin of where that came from. And it's super important to do that. I've had the best personal and professional conversations I've ever had in my life have all happened over a long meal. Just full stop. It's just
yeah.
always been that way. So I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, it doesn't happen in the boardroom. Definitely happens over a table.
Yeah. And from what you've observed, what do families miss when they try to design a meaningful travel experience? Like, I know so many families who don't even really look at the brochure. They're just like, yep, I trust so and so, blah, blah, blah. And then they're disappointed. What do you think is oftentimes missed in that pre-phase?
I think that they over design it, whether it's them or the agent in which they're working with. I think they over design it and they make it a checklist of things that they think that they need to see. And they really undervalue of like the participation that you can have with the immersive experiences that you design. So, for example, especially today, I'm guilty of this as well. On my honeymoon, I bought a professional camera. I traveled with it. I took thousands of photos over 18 days in Italy. I never, even with this business, go back and look at those photos. Number
Hmm.
one, I'm not a professional photographer, right? So now in my world, it's like I can't even use that. But I was seeing Italy on our honeymoon through a camera lens, right? And that you see it all in big sports moments, everyone has their iPhone out and up, and like no one's living in the moment anymore.
Hmm.
So I think right there, it's Instagram has kind of changed the game for travel or restaurants in a good way. But a lot of people are just traveling to check off a box, to take a selfie and say, hey, they were here. Versus really the way like we travel, it's very, I keep using the word immersive. It's you're feeling like you're part of that culture when you're visiting there because you are. And
Yeah.
whether or not, so to me, it's the meaning rarely comes down from like the most orchestrated part of the trip. It usually comes from the moment that people are drawn into something a lot more meaningful, whether it's a meal or sitting quietly in a chapel in a church. There's something that sticks with them that
Hmm.
goes beyond what just the itinerary was. Of course, you need structure. Of course, you need sequencing, pacing. All those things matter. But when someone sets out to either do it on their own or use a service, I think that's the biggest thing that they do. They look at it and go, well, there's only one or two things here, like on the itinerary today. I want to do 4. Then you're not really experiencing any of them. And you're also discounting the fact that where you are is already an experience versus it having to be something that is a checkbox on an itinerary.
I love that. You also talk about like participatory moments, like things that are shared, and it may not be seeing the Eiffel Tower. It might actually the stop you made at the cafe to have like this one really famous kind
Yeah.
of flaky, buttery croissant, right? Talk to us about why those moments may be just as important as, like you said, the big check the box moments.
I think whether it's your kitchen at home or when you're traveling, I think people remember something that they helped create. I think
Mm,
that participation, like you had just said, leaves a much stronger imprint on you personally, on your family, than just observation, right? When your hands are involved, when you're making pasta from scratch, when you're getting up early to go see how, you know, goats are milked in Greece, and and then it goes from the cheese, and you go through the whole process. It's a shared task that can bind you with whoever is there. There are people that not only that were producers that we still now work with, years later that we did, but there's also people that we experienced that trip with who we didn't know beforehand that we still keep in touch with today because of the shared experience that we had. So if that matters with complete strangers that you've never met before, think
hmm
about what that can mean if you actually go through it with your family. But I think people remember much more of if they helped make it, especially in our world, they remember it a lot more than just, you know, dish 10 on a tasting menu at a Michelin starred restaurant. Although those are great experiences too. I don't want to
Yeah.
discount them, but
Yeah.
it's a different experience.
Yeah. Well, I'll share one story. Last summer, we were in Africa, and it happened to hit over the time that my oldest daughter had her birthday. So we had apprised this, all these different camps we were going to that she had this birthday. But we're in different like parts of Africa in different cultures every camp. So
Yeah,
every camp at one of the meals, there would be a birthday celebration. So she had like multiple birthday celebrations in a 3 week time frame. But
that's
the
awesome. Yeah.
coolest part about it was that every camp that we went into, the singing, the dancing, the festivus around it was completely different. And of course, the like whatever I mean, sometimes we're like out in the bush. So there's not like,
Yeah.
you know, it was super gourmet for what normal we were glamping. I'm not gonna lie,
Hey,
um,
there's no other way to camp. You'll never catch me. I'm not even a glamper, to be honest, but yeah.
but I
If
had
I go to
to,
Africa, I have to.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to see the Great Migration and wake up with,
Yeah.
wildebeest in your like front of your tent and then have a birthday celebration. She will remember that birthday forever because
Yep.
it was like Groundhog Day over and over again. And it was so much fun to wake up every day and like basically be celebrating for 3 weeks. We thought maybe she'd get one birthday like around the
Yeah, yeah,
day.
yeah.
And then everyone was like, no, no, we like almost have to outdo. So it was really special. And I can imagine, when you want to memorialize like an important a marriage, like you getting married or an anniversary. Tell us more about where you see the marriage between food, culture, and like those celebrations.
Yeah. First of all, my bucket list item is actually a safari in Africa. I have never done that yet. So that is definitely on my list. I'm gonna wait for my girls to be a little bit older because I want
Yes.
them to have that same experience, not just my wife and I enjoying it. But that is definitely number one on my bucket list. Um, to your question, I think it comes around memory is obviously, the cliche word that pops up into my head, but I think it gives families a reference point long after they come back on their trip. So a birthday is great, but if I really asked you, what did you do on your 31st birthday, you might not be able to answer that really quickly. But if you were in Africa having that experience, you'd know that in a heartbeat that was attached to 31. So I think celebratory moments are almost through experiences. They will always be remembered that way. I say something often that a meal can become a story, a recipe can become a ritual. And that really is just shorthand for the family values that you're able to create. And I think when you create your own traditions, which is also super important, you shouldn't just rely on your history. You should make your own traditions that may or may not be continued or passed on, beyond you. But that's how you do it. I do something that when I travel, I keep a journal. And, one day in my head, I think, if I'm keeping all my itineraries and all the places and experience I had, how cool would it be if my grandchildren were able to do the same thing, 50, 60 years from now? So I'm probably more wired to that experience and memory and, aware of it than most people just because I'm obsessive about it. But I think that is a really cool way to,
Yeah.
celebrate your milestones in life.
I love it. And I also know we're fighting this love-hate relationship with AI and technology, where it's
Yes.
so conveniencing to make things easier and faster. And AI makes a smarter email than I can write, whatever your AI
Hmm.
weakness is. At the same time, like AI can't eat your dinner, or
No.
like AI can't really participate at the dinner table. So I also would love your take on why that human experience actually will never be replaced by AI.
I think at the very foundation that in-person experiences are forcing a level of literal presence and attention that AI and the digital world is constantly trying to pull us away from. So I think families are probably better when they travel and they slow down to maybe not be consuming email and social media and things like that. Um, but in your everyday life, I think it's really important to still have those, you know, unplugged moments. I mean, if you have your immediate family around you at a dinner table on a Sunday, what do you need your phone for? I mean, right, there's always the safety thing, and if your children aren't with you, and I get that, but I think as much as you can unplug, the better. And we are clearly going all in on, in-person experiences. Doesn't mean that we don't use AI. There's a lot of, mundane tasks that I've now automated. I tried to fight the trend and I said I'm going to be left behind if I don't do it. So
Yeah.
I've gone pretty deep into it now. I do love AI and it has a lot of really good benefits to it. But I'm not one of these people who thinks it's going to take away jobs from the sense of it's going to create new ones. And I think people still, from our world, I think the thing that is going to continue to build beyond just the AI movement is we say the word discernment all the time, or quite literally taste in our world. That is never going to be replaced by AI or robotics or anything like that. AI can't live your life. It could make your life better. It can make businesses better. But I think that this idea that, the robots are going to take over the world and we're no longer going to leave our homes, I'm not buying that.
I'm not buying that either.
Yeah.
I like to travel too much and I like to experience, and that artificial piece of the world doesn't replace, I think, the real. Tell me a story or something that really inspired you by what you saw with a client, and why it makes you double down on this whole business venture.
So one of our newer clients had came to us and asked us to plan a trip for him and his family very recently in Spain. And this is someone who has traveled the world for both business and leisure and has eaten at the best restaurants in the world and, had any experience that you can really think of. So when he came to us, it was really about, maintaining that, expectation and level, but taking it a step further, right? Not just eating at a Michelin starred restaurant, but, why are you there? Or having a unique experience just to them. So, a quote that we got on a recap call last week was, he's not a super emotional guy, so it meant a lot more, I think, from him, was that it was a life-changing experience and it brought 7 adults to tears at the table.
Mm,
And that's not to say that every experience has to have that, but it was the thoughtfulness behind it, the connection that they felt. They were having actually a celebratory moment from the sale of a business, and they were celebrating with their family and friends, and they had everyone around the table in literally the number one ranked restaurant in the world, And they were able to connect with the chefs and have an experience that, you can't just walk off the street and walk into. So that's an experience that is cemented in their minds for the rest
Yeah.
of their life. And, you know, there's no way that you can create and replace that, right? There's only one way to do that, and it's to live it. So we try to deliver those experiences often as we can.
That's such a great example of just the high touch, the tailored moment, the pinnacle of like a family founder achievement. That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. I know I could talk to you about food and traditions and gathering all day long, but sadly I've gotten to our lightning round. So I'm going
Okay.
to ask you a whole series of questions. Give me a short answer. We'll go through one by one. I'm so grateful that you joined us today on the Tamron Learning Podcast. Super fascinating. I want to come be a client of yours. So, okay, first
Love to
question.
have you. Yeah.
Okay. One family tradition worth reviving.
Weekly shared meals. I think whether it's especially on Sundays or Saturdays, depending on your religion. But we grew up Catholic. We're a Catholic family. Sundays are really important to us. It's not just the end of the work week. It's a time that we gather around our table, and we're never ordering food out. We're always cooking something. So I would say weekly shared meals and touch points with your loved ones is the most important thing that you can do.
I love it. Okay. One meal that instantly creates connection.
I think going back to what we said earlier about anything that you can cook together and participate in. Very specifically, when we do pasta here on Sundays, we're cooking pasta from scratch. Everyone from a 2-year-old to an 80-year-old great aunt can all participate in what you're doing. And some pieces, it's fun when you get a piece that the 2-year-old made. So I think pasta in general is something really a great tradition to build around.
Awesome. And what's one place every family should experience more slowly?
So right over my shoulder, that black sign right there actually says "Live Slow," which is something that my late father-in-law always said. Um, so thinking about this question probably more uniquely is your own local region to where you are,
Mm,
right? We always get in our car and we're driving to school, we're driving to church, we're driving to work, and we kind of just don't look at where you are has its own, you know, local flair to it or traditions. And, where we live here in Connecticut, there's so many farms and vineyards, and
mm.
just right here, you can have a very what you consider rustic European experience, right? Maybe it's not as great, but you can still have that locally. So I would slow down and look locally. I think that's most important.
Yeah. And one thing families should do more often around a table.
Definitely no devices, but that's an obvious answer for you. Um, Probably ask better questions. That's something that we're really, keen on with a 5-year-old, especially at the table, who loves to talk, and doesn't have a phone, that she doesn't even know that world yet. So I would say ask questions. More often than not, the first answer that you get is going to be informational. But if you peel that back a little bit more, it actually shows, what that person's thinking about and reveals a little bit more about how their day or week has been going. So I would say that ask more questions and definitely participate in doing it. Even if you don't consider yourself a cook prior to sitting down at the table, get involved because it's
Yeah.
it's fun. And people who really love to cook, like us, I don't care if you're not a cook or it might not be the best technique. To me, it's just the experience of doing it together. That's the most important thing.
One word you hope listeners leave this conversation with.
Tradition.
Tradition. I love it. I love it, Brian. This was such a great conversation. I really
Yeah.
appreciate just the thoughtfulness, the approach, your connection to food, and weaving it with travel and having deeper experiences, how that translates into new traditions, cultural intelligence, family memories, all of the above. And you've opened my eyes to say, well, what can I bring to my family? What can I do a little bit differently? I know you build these unbelievable, curated, specialized tours and experiences. Tell us more where people can find about Food First Travel.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for your kind words. I love that we was able to do a little bit of that for you today. Our website will be probably the best thing that will always be able to find us. So www.foodfirsttravel.com. We have a very literal name for a reason. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So I would love to hear from some of your listeners and, hear about, what, they resonated the most with what we shared today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining the Tamarind Learning Podcast. If you enjoyed this, you're listening today, please subscribe. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and share it with your friends and family because we need more folks to know about Brian Burke and food travel experiences and building those traditions in our family. So thanks again, Brian.
Thank you, Kirby. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to Tradition at the Table. How food, travel, and shared experiences shape family legacy, featuring Brian Burke. If today's conversation inspired you to think more intentionally about the traditions, values, and experiences that shape your family's legacy, continue your learning with Tamarind Learning. Explore our Family Governance Foundations and Stewardship courses, and don't miss our most popular webinar, How to Make Family Meetings More Effective, for practical ideas you can start using right away. You can find these courses at www.tamarindlearning.com/education. You can find the webinar at www.tamarindlearning.com/resources/webinars. Thank you for listening, and be sure to join us again next month for another insightful conversation with Dr. Kirby Rosplock on the Tamarind Learning Podcast.